What's happening, fishing friends, and welcome to another episode. Now, it's still cold for me here, and I hope that's okay because it gives me time to do some preparation on some of my gear for spring. Specifically, I'm going to be getting my reels spooled up with some fresh line, and today I'm going to be spooling up this. This is the Shimano Sedona spinning reel I got. Y'all seen this in an unboxing video I did. I got it on the Gander sale for like 18 bucks, so couldn't pass this baby up. But in today's video, I want to discuss some of the common ways that I have heard of people spooling up a spinning reel and some of the misconceptions with those. Now, I'm also going to discuss some of the tips and tricks throughout the spooling process that will help alleviate line twists, line tangle, all that stuff that can be so aggravating for a beginner. And finally, I'll take you through exactly how I like to set up my spinning reels, the line I use on them, all that good stuff. Okay, so spooling up a spinning reel seems to be a lot more controversial than a baitcaster. You know, baitcaster is easy, right? The line comes off this spool over the top, right? It's coming off the top of it into the baitcaster. As you reel it in, it's bringing it over the top. So it's kind of like a pulley system, a timing belt in the car. Goes off the line spool into your baitcaster and you just reel it on. Now with the spinning reel, it's a little bit different because of this, the bail arm. Once you close that bail and start to reel it, that bail arm is moving around the spool on your reel. It's not coming straight off this line and going right on here. This is moving around, but let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's do a quick test here. I hear some people say you always want the label up. You want the line coming off in a clockwise direction when you're spooling this. Let's see what this happens. Do about, I don't know, 15 rotations with it here, and let's see what happens with it clockwise. All right, as you can see here, this is the dreaded stuff that we're talking about, line twist. You see that right there? Get it in focus, Debo. There you go. See that line twist? How that's twisting all up on itself? You see that? That's the line twist that we're trying to avoid. Now, that was with the label up going clockwise. Let me cut this off. Let's try flipping it around going counterclockwise. All right, got that cut off, and this time let's try it with the bottom up so it's coming off counterclockwise. See how that goes around? Let's give that a try. Again, we'll try, 15, 20 reels here or so. And you can see, same issue. We're still getting some line twists. Doesn't appear to be as bad this way, but we're still getting some. So let's try the final way. I'll cut this off. Try doing it the way I do for a baitcaster. Okay, let's try the final way. I got that tie back onto my reel, cut this line so it's fresh here, and I've just put this in my made-up spooling station deal. This is what I normally do in a little box. The line is coming off the top, just like I would with the baitcaster. Let's see how this does. And again, we'll do about 15 or 20 reels of this just to see how it goes. There we go. Couple reels more and look. Looking at the exact same thing right there. You see that? All this here, again, the exact same line twisting issue. Let's take a closer look and I'll tell you what I'm talking about. So I hope you can see what I was talking about. With this bail arm moving around, it's taking the line off here no matter which way you have it. Bottom up, sticker up, the way I'm doing it now. Doesn't matter. Heck, I've even heard of some people flipping it over halfway in between. My old man, he throws the spool out in the water on the boat when he does it, or some people put the spool in a bucket of water when they're spooling it up. But every way I've tried, you're always going to get a little bit of line twist, and that's because of this. This bail arm is moving around. It's pulling this line off here and wrapping it around your spool just like so. Now, the only way I could really think to avoid that is if you were taking line directly off this and putting it on this way. If you could actually take your spool off and pull it on directly. I've seen there's also a company that has a deal where you hook it to your rod and the line spool sits here and twists and turns as you spool it up onto your reel. I think Piscifin makes it maybe. I don't know. If you've tried that, let me know if that eliminates it. Otherwise, everything I've tried, you're always going to get a little bit of line twist. But let me take you through the process of how I do this and the tips I use to avoid it. So the first thing I'm going to do is open up my bail here. So if you're new to a spinning reel, this is the bail. You have to open that up. You want to tie your knot this way. That way, when you close it, you're all ready to reel it up. So open my bail. I'm going to take my line, wrap it around the spool, and I'm just going to tie an improved clinch knot. Now you can tie an arbor knot. There's a number of different knots you could tie. The improved clinch has worked for me though. Okay, you can see there with the improved clinch knot, I can pull that down. It pulls nice and tight to the spool just like that. Now I don't tape this. I've heard some people even super glue it. I don't do any of that. Tie your knot, cut off the tag end, which is just this loose end that's not connected to the spool. Cut that baby off like so and move on to the next step. All right, so the first thing you want to remember when you're putting line on the spinning reel, whenever you're using nylon line, especially like a monofilament fluorocarbon, these are going to have memory, which means it's that coiling, right? It's stuck to the memory of that spool. It wants to coil off. So you have to be careful and keep your line pulled tight. That's going to help. So keep that line pulled tight. You could use your fishing towel. This is a little towel that just connects to my backpack that I take when I'm bank fishing. You can hold it with that. I just hold it with my bare hands. It doesn't really matter to me, but whatever you're holding with, make sure it's not going to burn this. It's not going to be abrasive and get any nicks or cuts in it. Otherwise, you got a good chance of breaking off. So I'm going to start doing this. Now I'm going to go, I don't know, I keep my tension so it's tight. but I don't want to hold it so tight that it's impeding my spool's ability to do its job. This spool moves up and down as you put line on it. So I'm going to hold this decently tight. I can't tell you exactly how much, but not so much that it's going to burn your fingers off and rip them off, and not so tight that it's going to stop that spool from moving up and down. So I'm going to start putting the line on just like this, keeping a good tension. So as I'm going through, I'm going to stop every so often and apply some line conditioner. So this is a silicone-based line conditioner that, as you can see, helps reduce that memory. It takes that memory out and increases casting distance. It's really just putting a thin layer of that silicone coating on there that helps this line from grabbing itself and sticking to it and, getting those wind knots that pull out, similar to a non-stick pan. I'm just applying some of that every so often as I go through. Just apply that in little spritzes as you're going through, and I'm going to keep putting line on it. Keeping tension on, I'm going to keep filling her up. All right, so I've added more line. I'm going to stop for a second, apply a little bit more line conditioner, just like so, and keep going. Okay, so I got that all spooled up. This is just some cheap backing line that I use. This is what I use before I put braid on, which is normally how I do all my spinning reels, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But just using some of this cheap line to show you, because as you're spooling this up, you want to make sure and keep a close eye on how much you're putting on here. As you can see at the top of the spinning reel here, there's a part that curves down. You want to make sure you stay with about 1/8 of an inch of the edge of that. If you go over that and get line all the way up to the edge of this where it's going to start creeping over it, you've got too much line. And what's going to happen is when you cast off, a lot of this is going to kind of ball up and you'll get that weird knot that goes all the way up to the first guide and it's all tangled up. You've got too much line on there, so you can put too much line on this. Be careful not to do that. Now on the opposite side, you don't want to put too little on. So let's say you stopped halfway, about half the line that we have on here now. You're going to end up with two problems. The first problem is that if you don't have enough line on here, this line is going to bang on this lip as it comes off. It's going to beat on this when it's not completely full, and you're going to lose a lot of casting distance. Now the second issue you're going to run into is you're going to lose speed. So if you have this less full, let's say maybe I'm trying to make a little loop of line around my thumb, it would only take about that much line to loop around my thumb. Now, as opposed to this whole bale, it's going to take a lot more line to loop around there. Let's say that much. The more line you have on the reel, the more line you're taking in for each turn of the reel. You're bringing in more line, keeping that reel fast. If you only have a little bit on there, you're only going to bring a little bit of line in for every turn. So essentially, you're going to lose speed on your reel. Okay, now this is a perfect segue. I cut that off and look what happens. After you spool up your reel and let go of it, look at that. See how it's just popping off there and hopping off all over? That's that line memory. It's trained to the size of this spool, not this spool. So the first thing I like to do after I get my line cut and get this all on here, you can see all this stuff's falling off here, jumping off. Just to give you a better look. See that? See all those loops that happen? I take the first few yards of it and pull it. As I pull that, now see what happens? Nice and straight. I pulled those loops out, nylon, fluorocarbon, it stretches. So when you have a bunch of those little loops in there, you can take it and pull it out, pull it tight like that. And you're going to get rid of all that line memory. It's a good straight line. So that's the first thing I do. Take a couple yards out, pull it tight to reduce that memory. Once you get all this line wound down, there's a little piece on spinning reels where you can take your line and push it down into that little hole, just like so, and pull it tight. That's actually a line keeper. So when you're not using it, you don't have a bait tied on, it actually holds your line there. So you can do that with it, and it keeps it nice and stored without a whole bunch of line hanging off. So I lock my line on there, and I'm going to take my spool off. Now this is a trick that I learned from watching Bill dance. Take my spool off, and let's head over to the sink. To the sink? What for, Debo? Well, I'm glad you asked. We're going to retrain this line so it stays on this spool and keeps the shape of this. So the first thing I'm going to do, your drag washers and everything are all up in there. I want to protect those. I don't want to get them wet. Not that it would necessarily hurt it, but I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to take a paper towel and shove in there. And take a paper towel and shove in the bottom. Now, it's not an issue if you get your drag and stuff wet in there. It does kind of mix with the grease, but just make sure you let this air dry out completely before you put this on the reel. And what I'm going to do is turn on some hot water. Also, this is a pet peeve of anybody else. I just want regular soap. I want to wash my hands with regular soap, not winter candy apple. Thanks to my old lady. Anywho, I want to put on some hot water, not, regular warm water, like lukewarm temperature. I want to put on some hot water like I would normally wash my hands with. Not scalding, burn my fingers off, but hot water. All right, that's some good high quality hot H2O. I'm going to put that right on here like this. I'm going to do this and try to keep it towards the front end of it and just keep spinning it for, I don't know, about a minute or so. I want to get this hot water on here, and it's going to retrain this line to take the shape, oh gosh, shape of this spool. Oh, that was an absolute fail, Debo. Again, make sure you keep this nice and completely dry. Okay, you can see there I kept the top dry with that paper towel in there. It did fall out, but I just made sure to keep it this way so the water didn't get in there. Same thing for the bottom. The bottom kept all dry with the paper towel in there. Now, I let this air dry just to be sure. And what happens when you take this off the line keeper, Now when you let it go, look what happens. One coil came off. That's it. One little tiny coil after I put hot water on that and retrained it. Look, that's all that came off there, one little coil. So instead of when I let it go before and 15 of those coils tried to jump off there, I've retrained it to the size of this spool and wants to stay in that shape. Doesn't want to jump off there. That'll save you a ton. Now, let's get this put back together and I'll go back over there and talk about casting this. Okay, so after you have your reel all put together and put on your rod and you're ready to go out fishing, the number one thing you want to remember is you want to avoid slack line. Slack line is going to give you all kinds of issues on a spinning reel. So the process of avoiding slack line starts as soon as you cast. You know, with a spinning reel, you open up the bail, take it, fling your lure out there. Some people take their hand and close the bail this way. They use this and go and flip it over. Look what that does. That moves slack line and it throws it. So you want to avoid that. So when I'm out in the field casting, you know, let's say I'm working a drop shot, shaky head, Ned rig, I cast the lure out. I use my opposite hand, in my case, the left hand, to close the bail. And then I take my left hand and pull that line tight. The reason I'm doing that is I want to make sure that line is seated in that line roller. So right here on your bail where it closes there, there's a line roller. So as that line gets pulled out, you can see there's a little piece that moves and rolls and helps assist that line to roll out. I want to make sure that my line is sitting in there before I start to reel or work my lure or anything. Okay, the next big part comes when you're working the lure. So if you have something like a little spinner bait or something that like crankbait that you're casting out and just consistently reeling with a spinning reel, no big deal. As long as you seat your line in that line roller and you start rolling, shouldn't have any issues. It should be tight all the way back. But if you're working something like a Ned rig, a drop shot, a shaky head, after I cast that bait out, I'm closing my bail and I'm making sure it's seated in that line roller, just like so. I'm going to start working my rod to move. Let's say I've got a Ned rig. I pop it 2, 3, 4 times. Keep your rod tip up. That way my line is still tight on that last little pop, and then roll down your slack, okay? What you don't want to do is cast it out, have a whole bunch of slack like this, you know, just kind of hanging here. You work it up so there's a whole bunch of slack, and then drop your rod tip so there's all this slack hanging here, and then reel it up. Because if you've got all this slack and start reeling up, there's a good chance you're going to get this wrapped around here. It's going to get wrapped around the bottom of your spool. You can end up with issues that way. So just remember, if you're using a lure that you work with the rod, Ned rig, you know, whatever it may be, cast it out, close your bail, make sure everything's tight, pop, pop, pop. And on that last pop where everything's tight, reel down your slack then, okay? Now, if you don't want to, if you're afraid of, you know, moving the bait or something with it up like that, cast it out, work your bait, drop it down, but before you drop it down, just make sure everything's pulled nice and tight. Some people even hold it with their finger. There's a number of different things you can do, but just be conscious of that. Anytime you're working a lure with the rod, don't reel up slack line. And by that, I mean floppy slack line like this. Of course, you have to reel, you know what I mean. Okay, so I showed you a setup for monofilament or fluorocarbon. The things you want to remember, a nylon line is different, but let me grab one of my other rigs and talk about the benefits of braid and why I believe in it. I'll be right back. Okay, this is one of the setups I used last year. This is my shaky head drop shot, kind of do it all, medium power spinning rod with a 3000 size reel. That's my favorite all around do anything spinning combo. Now, you can see here I've got some yellow line on there. That's some 15-pound Power Pro braid. This is the super slick stuff. The thing I like about braid is, look at that. See how it's just hanging all limp and not caring about anything? Braid doesn't have any memory. You don't have to worry about putting a whole bunch of braid on here and having all those coils jump off and such. You don't have the line twist type thing. You don't have to worry about memory with braid. So that's the number one reason I've switched to using braid on all my combos. Now, I talked about this in another video and somebody brought up a great point and said, hey, you need to check out Brian Latimer's video. I think he did it on Wired to Fish. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody linked me the video and I watched it. And he uses basically braid on all of his combos, except for he gave a couple examples where you want all fluorocarbon, where you want that line to sink, you know. Now, a lot of it's just personal preference. Some people like going straight mono or straight braid because they hate to tie a leader. And I get it. That's completely personal preference. I wasn't a big fan of it until, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I started messing with it. And what I mean by a leader is I never fish straight braid, so I don't ever take just my braid. Heck's that stuck on? I don't ever take just my braid and tie a lure directly to the braid. I tie a leader. So as you can see, they're a nice little small knot. That's the Alberto knot. That's the knot I've become comfortable with. I can tie it really fast. I haven't had any breaking issues. So I always use a leader on mine, about 6, 7 feet. I just want to make sure that when I reel this up, my leader knot is just past this, but it never goes into the reel. So when I have this reeled all the way up and I'm ready to cast it, I want my leader knot to be before this first line guide, but not going into the reel. You don't want to have that knot go down into the reel where it can get caught. Then when you cast it, it can get caught on another line and you've got all sorts of problems. But I tie a leader. Leaders give you the freedom to use that nylon line. So whether it's a fluorocarbon or maybe you want a little bit of stretch with monofilament, you can have a line on there that the fish aren't going to see as easy. Instead of some glaring yellow bright line, I've got fluorocarbon on here. I could go 6 pound. I usually don't go below 8 pound now. Something with like a shaky head, I'll usually go 10 pounds, but you can put a clear line on there. Fluorocarbon is more abrasion resistant than a straight braid, so there's a number of different things you can mix and match. Now, additionally, you've got the benefit of braid sensitivity. You cannot argue that braid is the most sensitive line. It's got no stretch in it. So when you're working something like this, a shaky head, a drop shot, whatever it is, you've got such a direct connection. Whereas if you're using monofilament, there's a good amount of stretch in there and you will miss bites. If you go straight monofilament, it's harder to detect a bite as opposed to going straight braid or braid with a leader. So that's why I do it. I can cast a lot farther with braid. Braid comes off here much easier. I don't have to worry about those knots, those spool knots coming off there. To me, it's just so much more manageable. And braid doesn't go bad, so I don't have to change braid on a reel like this. When my leader gets down, from cutting and retying, I'm just going to snip that knot off above right there on the braid, cut that off and tie a new leader on, and I'm ready to go. So, all right, fishing friends, that's going to do it for today. Now, I want you all to remember, I honestly don't think it matters which way you have the spool. There's this huge spool debate. Label up, label down, flipping halfway in between, in a bucket of water. I don't know. All the ways I've tried, initially, they're going to give you line twists no matter what you use. The important part is what you do while you're spooling up, the things like holding the line tight, adding a little bit of line conditioner, pulling the first couple yards out tight to reduce that initial twist, and then taking that spool off and running it under some hot water to train the memory to this spool, not the big line spool. In my opinion, those were the biggest things that helped me. Now, again, you could avoid all that. Put some braid on here. You don't have to worry about the line twist and all that other stuff. Increase casting distance. I'm not going to get into it, but comment below and let me know if you have any questions about spooling up a spinning reel, if there's more spinning reel type videos you want to see. Maybe you want to see a line video, mono and fluorocarbon versus braid, pitching and flipping with the spinning reel. I don't know, whatever it is, comment below and let me know. I appreciate it. Now, today's subscribe fishing friend shout out goes to Captain Mark. Captain Mark, thank you always for watching, commenting. We have some good conversations back and forth. And of course, thank you to everybody else who watches. Without all of you, again, my channel would be nothing except some guy in a basement. So while you've got some downtime, get some new line on your reels. You'll be happy when spring comes that they're fresh and ready to go. But that's enough for me. It's late. Got to edit. So until next time, thank you for watching.